I don't want an agent that's running around and could just take down my system because it's trying to help. I want a self-improving system, a self-improving agent system. Every time someone uses my product or my agent and it works well, I want that to feed back into a data set. Every time it doesn't work well, I want that to feed it back into a data set. And then I want to see that automatically improve my system over time.
Welcome to episode 45 of Tool Use, the weekly conversation about AI tools and strategies brought to you by Enetic. I'm Mike Bird, and today we're talking about building AI teammates, the agents, the evals, what you need to know to make yourself an assistant. This week, we're joined by Diamond Bishop, the Director of Engineering and AI at Datadog. Diamond, welcome to Tool Use.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So do you mind giving us a little bit of your background?
Sure. I'm a longtime AI or ML guy. I'll be dating myself a little bit, but I've been in this field for 15 plus years. Having worked at one point on the assistant for Windows Phone, that's how long ago this was, on Cortana. Working on Alexa after that for a while, helping get that from beta to GA, and working on a bunch of like fun AI products, jumping around. I worked at PyTorch at Facebook for a little while, ran my own startup that was building AI assistants. And now I work on AI agents and evaluation tools and all the like for Datadog.
Very cool. Would you mind giving us a little insight to what Bits AI is?
Bits AI is the main product that I drive here right now. And Bits AI is really meant to be a set of AI agents that help you get things done across Datadog. So anything you would use for DevSecOps, if I'm going to be debugging a problem that's coming through my system, Bits will help you debug, run log queries, run trace queries, all sorts of stuff like that. And really our goal in general is to either sit alongside you and save you time, or ideally be able to do tasks for you that you don't have to. So I always say I'm trying to get people to use Datadog less. I don't know if my CEO likes me saying it quite that way, but that's generally the goal for our assistants.
What do you consider an important design principle or approach to make sure that you build the trust with the users so they can start putting their agents in these high value situations?
Yeah, that's very important, especially if you're talking about production systems, right? I don't want an agent that's running around and could just take down my system because it's trying to help. So a lot of it for us right now, there's kind of two parts. One is making sure that we're understanding the quality of the agents that we're putting out there. This is a bit of that eval aspect. And another part of it is building the right, I call it kind of either escape hatches or double checks, right? Where it's like, I want to make sure that if you're going to take an action, that the human checks first. We keep the human in the loop for a lot of the major actions. Over time, we expect to reduce that, kind of like the self-driving world, right? There's a bit of it, if we're on the highway and everything's good, you don't have to do very much. But if I need something, I'm going to change it up. I kind of want to make sure that the human's still there and can kind of make its choice. We're not quite at the level of the Waymo situation where we can be completely, hands off the wheel. And we think that's very important for earning trust, is surface the right information to our customers, surface the right expectations, and then make sure the human can do things like check a PR if we're trying to check in code, hit the button to actually spin up some servers if we think that's the best thing to do next to solve a problem. And we won't do that automatically for you yet.
Very cool. And I definitely want to dive deep into evals, but just about the escape hatch idea. I've had some people on the show talk about human in the loop and how important it is. What type of modalities or interfaces do you think are appropriate for kind of managing your fleet of agents right now? Is it just going to be a series of pop-ups? Will we get emails or texts? What do you think is a good interface for that?
Our goal in general is to try to be where you work. So for a lot of our customers, that's like Slack or Teams. So right now, Bits will actually talk to you in Slack. And if it needs to show you more information, we have a page that it'll bring you to that you can click through to. But for very simple things, we're going to reach out to you. We're going to give you a summary of what Bits is doing. We're going to ask you a question. We're just going to do that in Slack, just like another teammate on your team would do.
Perfect. Now, kind of pulling it back to the building of agents, do you have either heuristics or just a general principle for when something should be an agent versus just make a script for it? What are the criteria to kind of bring AI into the mix versus just having deterministic code run through a process?
I think the very first part is, can you do it with deterministic code? If you can, you should. No reason not to. I think it's Satya who said something like, I don't use my Ferrari to go across the street to get groceries or something like that. I think he was talking about different size models, but I think it's very applicable here too, where you have all this power and this power is useful for certain things. You don't need all that power if it can be solved with a couple lines of code. So first thing I always ask people is have you tried writing this in traditional software? Do you know that the test cases you have can't be solved with that? And then the most of the time when it can't be, it's because there's something ambiguous or there's some long tail of options you'd have to try. So for the SRE agent, the reason it can't just be a simple workflow is that anyone who's debugged a system knows that you can't just follow like a few steps in your runbook, because if you could do that, we would just automate that. Any programmer would have automated that already. So there's a lot of this like reasoning and kind of making choices along the way, and you might branch off once you see some data. So I think a lot of it comes down to, will you change the workflow or change your mind on what needs to be done based on the data that you see? And is there a very long tail of cases that you're not just going to be able to encode in a bunch of if-else statements?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The fuzzy nature of LLMs give it its power, but as soon as you rely too much on it, that's when hallucinations and mistakes kind of get in the way and derail a process. When you're going about building agents, so we've already determined that there's some ambiguity there, so we need the power of the LLM to kind of take ambiguity and make sense of it. What are some thoughts you have around architecting an agent? Is there frameworks you follow? Do you try to make sure that there's checks and balances along the way, or how do you architect a new agent?
I think a lot of it in the very beginning is less about the framework and more about you as a dev or your team knowing that you have appropriate observability into what's happening. So you need to be logging kind of what your agent is doing and have ways to kind of replay the choices that were made. And that's more important than any particular framework to me. And a lot of that is just back to the first time you build something, there's going to be so many things that go wrong. And because it's this stochastic kind of fuzzy system, if you don't have really good like logging and debuggability, you're just going to kind of be banging your head against like, the door, the wall, whatever it is that you're close to for quite a while you're trying to figure out how to actually make your system work well.
And just on that note of observability, is that an area that agents can help us with?
It is, I think. One of the things that I'm thinking a lot about right now, this is not a product that exists yet, is who watches the Watchmen in some sense? Like, can I build an agent that tells me, that's smart enough and knows how to build other agents, or like knows how to do this kind of eval process and improvement process, that I can get some guidance? Because especially if I'm someone who doesn't build these normally, we have a lot of people who are getting into the field now. I don't always know, what does it mean to build an eval data set? How do I actually go and then run this eval? How do I go and test new ideas out? How do I go and make sure it's improving? How do I hill climb against it? Should I be fine tuning? Should I be changing my prompts? Should I be doing a bunch of things like that? I think there's ways to actually get help from another AI system to kind of inform you on what to do better. And it's very similar to what we do with the alert investigation work that happens for the SRE agent, where you might go and look at a bunch of logs and say, hey, here's some errors we're seeing. You might go cluster a bunch of information and say, we're doing error analysis automatically for you. And by the way, your agent is really bad at answering questions about, I don't know, what someone's doing in the morning if you're a calendar agent or something. And then it might not be able to solve it for you automatically, but it could at least surface this information. So I absolutely think that there's a world where there's almost this secondary agent or AI system that helps improve the one that you're building.
Yeah, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that too. I had someone on there talk about the idea of it being almost like more of a video game interface rather than classical text box. One thing you mentioned, and I'd like to hear just your general thoughts on it, is prompt engineering versus fine tuning. Do you have a line when you choose one or the other, or is it so situational that there's no real rules for it?
I think this is kind of back to the what does your experimentation framework look like and what have you tried so far? So always try prompt engineering first. It's cheap, it's easy to do. You can try a bunch of things very fast. And as long as you have a good eval data set, you can try it and see if it works. And if it works, great. Maybe you don't need anything else. I think once you start getting to a point where you're not getting any returns by doing prompt engineering, by changing the context, and you have enough data, which enough data is fuzzy, but you've got, couple hundred, couple thousand data points that you think are reasonable, then try fine tuning. It's not that expensive to try. A lot of the proprietary providers offer APIs for doing that now, and see if you get any gains from it. The big risk with fine tuning is kind of the same risk with like training your own model. New models are going to come out all the time. You want to be ready to try those out too. You don't want to lock yourself in. So if it's a ton of work to do fine tuning, don't spend the time. But I think it should be getting easier over time to just say, hey, I'm going to quickly try some fine tuning, compare it to my eval. If it doesn't do anything, great, throw it away. If it does something that I think is measurable, yeah, let's use it. And then when the new model comes out, let's go compare the two again. Let's do some A/B testing. Let's say, does the newest, Anthropic model beat my fine-tuned model? If it does, throw out the fine-tuned model and just feel comfortable with that.
Yep, there's actually a project that's going to have their V3 release soon called Augment Toolkit, and it should really streamline the process of fine-tuning models, which I think will help democratize it. But I agree, prompt engineering first, try to exhaust that route completely.
Yep.
On the note of data sets for creating these evals and whatnot. Do you have a strategy for either automating it, or is having your like golden data set so important that it should always be handwritten?
I think it's a mix. I don't think that it needs to be all handwritten, but I do think that you need to have kind of human alignment in this aspect. So a lot of it in the beginning is like you don't have any data. Most people, right? You're just building this agent or the system, and you have maybe a few examples, like 5 examples that you care about. So start with that. Start with whatever you have. That's fine. But then you need to move quickly to either generate a lot more, either synthetically, which is possible. So you can take examples that you have, even use LLMs to try to produce new examples, or find other ways to perturb your examples and produce a wider set of synthetic data. And then ideally, you'll move quickly to get real world data with your system and start to have either you or some other customers kind of interacting with your system and logging this and starting to build up a data set. And a sampling of that should go to humans. So always take a sampling of that and do your human annotation or human check to see what ground truth should be. But I think if your system is set up for it, you should be doing LM as a judge for a chunk of it and just doing what's called alignment to compare human evaluation versus the LM as a judge, and make sure that you bring those two closer together and you can trust the LM as a judge. And then that way you can run and build ground truth or close to ground truth data sets for a lot larger data than like you as a single person are going to be able to do. You can't go and tag or annotate like 1,000 or 2,000 data points, but you can annotate 100, and it's completely reasonable. And you should do that in the beginning.
So on top of collecting the data sets, what other things do people need to get into place in order to start building these eval suites that they can either run on their project or even have as a personal eval suite?
I think there's a couple things here. One of them is knowing how you're going to actually measure success. So you need to have your success metric defined and how you're going to actually do evaluation to say this test case passed or not. And I recommend largely, especially in the beginning, it should basically be a pass or fail for most cases, unless it's very quantifiable. Because if you give people like a Likert scale of like 1 through 5, or you give like 10 dimensions that you're trying to measure, it's just too much at the beginning. Like you're not really thinking enough about what's the core problem you're trying to make the system solve, I think. And you can add on things later. You can add new dimensions that you care about later, but you really just want a simple, single, probably custom metric for yourself. The other part that I recommend is don't use off-the-shelf metrics. A lot of people will just pick up a library and be like, I'm going to use a hallucination metric. It's like, yeah, that's nice to know, but that's probably not your main thing. If you're building an agent that, is made to help people write a report on a particular tool, a particular set of data, you probably have an idea of what the success of that report looks like, and you should be able to measure that yourself in a custom way, rather than saying, did it hallucinate or not? So think a lot about that. And then after you kind of have a measure of your evaluation, you need to have a process for sampling data, which means you need to have a logging process. You need to have a way to get feedback. And you need to have a process for annotating that data. And that looks like usually grabbing Label Studio or something and having a human process for doing some labeling, and then setting up some sort of LM as a judge alongside that. So I think those are kind of like the early steps.
Excellent. And on the note of LM as a judge, especially aligning it with the human alignment, is that a very manual process? Because I imagine you have to kind of run the LLM as a judge against a certain data set and then look at it yourself and just say, do these match? Or is there any way to kind of expedite that process?
It's pretty manual in the beginning.
Right.
I would say the main way to expedite is just make sure that you have experts you trust. That's either you or someone else in your team or people you're working with, maybe your customers sometimes if you're doing early design partnership with someone. Because the people who actually care about that output and write it normally are going to be the ones who can fastest tell you if it's like a good result or not.
Pulling it back to like building the AI agents, when someone's getting started, they hear about all the promise and they want to start investigating, putting one together themselves. Have you noticed a trend in issues that people will face when they're first building that if they had a little bit of advice, they might make less mistakes?
I think the big one is thinking about this, how you're going to evaluate it from the beginning. There is a natural instinct, and we run into this ourselves all the time within Datadog, to build something quickly that looks cool. You're like, oh yeah, demos well, looks great, let's ship it. It's like, and not realize like you're going to be spending the next 6 months just doing eval and like understanding if it works, how it works, and what you're going to do. And if you don't think about that from the beginning, you sometimes miss things that you could have done for cheaper. So a good example of this is like if I'm building an interface with an agent, I should very simply have a way for a customer to give us explicit feedback, or I should have a way to get implicit feedback from a customer. So that's a thumbs up, thumbs down. That's knowing if they click through on the thing they want. And if I don't build that in from the beginning, it becomes hard for me to get that uh, understanding of how well it's working. And I think that that's also true for some, back to this human in the loop aspect. You have to assume your agent's not going to be right every time. Like that, these systems are stochastic. These systems are wrong frequently. And you need to have designed for, or at least start to think about, what does it mean when it's wrong? And how do I build a good process that doesn't just like, it either has to be 100% correct or we throw it out, because it's never going to be 100% correct.
And as people start building the intuition as to what metrics to gather, do you have an idea for what the hello world for AI agents is? Is there something that people could do to kind of get into the routine of building something from the early stages?
I think a lot of it is just like pick something that you do yourself relatively repetitively that you would be the expert on, and build something small. That could be gathering data from a few different data sources that you normally do every Monday morning when you're getting into work and want to, get caught up on something, seeing what PRs went out over the last week and, what's kind of your update, pulling together a status update. That could be just doing something very basic that you don't actually want the agent to automate, but you at least know how to check to see if it worked well. And just try something out. Like, I think right now it's such early days that we should all just be hacking on little things here and there.
And what's your tool stack right now? Do you use Cursor, Windsurf, anything like that?
Personally, I kind of dual wield. I use Cursor and I use Cloud Code. And the reason that I use two, and I actually even Codex occasionally right now, is because I think there are certain projects where I'm just trying to get something like, I'm trying to get the bare bones out. I'm starting on a new project. I'm okay to YOLO mode it. I'm like, hey, let's just try something like Cloud Code, go for it. Let's see what happens, right? I'm trying to create a demo. I'm trying to show something what I mean rather than writing a spec. That's one of the things I really like doing now with these products is like, sometimes I'm trying to explain something and I don't want to have to go and like write a whole doc in it. I just want to get a demo out that's like, this is kind of what I'm talking about. And I can do that far faster now than writing, which is kind of wild to think about. And then I use Cursor if I'm more pointed, like we're working in an existing code base. We're trying to just like add a feature or make some fixes here and there or ask questions about a code base. I find Cursor to be more useful for that.
Very cool. And are there any other AI tools in your general workflow, something like voice input or help you with your writing that you use on a regular basis?
I pretty consistently use Gemini directly. And in particular, I actually use Elm Notebook uh, a lot. I write a update for the company, really for just anyone who's interested, as like a kind of a weekly newsletter thing every Sunday night. That's here's what's happening in AI space that probably matters to us at Datadog. And it's for people who like aren't living on Twitter or living in always looking at every new update that comes out, because there's so many new things coming out. And I'm trying to just be a little bit pointed on like our product teams, our engineers, everyone like that. I'm like, hey, here's something interesting that we might want to try out this week. And I will throw all that data into LM Notebook every Sunday night and create a podcast out of it and create some little like kind of Q&A things out of it. And I actually really love that. I've been doing that I think I'm on issue number 40 where I've been using it. So I've been using it every week for quite a while.
That's so cool. Yeah. And I live quite rural, so everything's a long drive away from me. So being able to take anything written and turn it into an audio source is massive for me. And just having something read out loud doesn't quite do it as much as like a podcast style conversation.
Right. It's still a little light, but like, we have people like it because for us, it's the subway, right? A lot of us are in New York. So same thing of like, we're just hopping on the subway for 30 minutes and then, listen to something.
Have you noticed any, whether it's internal or external, hesitation towards adopting AI tools? Or people still kind of wanting to make sure they hang on to the old way of doing things? Or has it been pretty universal that these tools are going to improve things, so may as well start using them now?
There's definitely a mix still, and I expect that for a long time. We have a lot of people who are just very excited about the concept and the potential, who are hopping in and just trying anything, and I love to see that. And I think that's how you need to be. You need to be curious. You need to be trying things out. But we definitely have a lot of people who, or a contingent of folks who maybe tried something 2 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, and it just didn't work well for them then, and they're very skeptical of it now. And that's fair. And I think it's really hard too if you don't take the time to get to know them and try it out, because if you just use Cursor or Cloud Code like once without really learning the process, you're going to create something that's probably not great. You're going to kind of like a garbage in, garbage out situation. And then that'll turn you off of it for good if you're not a curious person who wants to try a bunch of things out. So we definitely see some of that skepticism. I'd say the way that I work against it is very much let's just keep showing people what's possible. I think the way to do it is you kind of drum up interest and you get people, you kind of prove by using the tools and showing them yourself what's working well and what's not.
And because we're starting to see a wider range of tools being adopted, do you have any insight as to, or any thoughts on the principles for what makes a great AI tool?
I think a lot of it is related to, did they really design for the cases where you need to have human in the loop? Did you really design for allowing customization? Um, I forget who wrote this recently. I think maybe Steve Yeg talked about making it possible for people to adjust the prompts yourself. I think that's terribly important because if horseless carriages, that's the name of the article. Because if you don't actually go and make it so that anyone who's a power user who wants to learn it or who wants to change it can customize it to themselves, you're going to get things like, Gmail writing in a style that's not you. And then you kind of get turned off of it, right? Or like, the coding style not listening to the set of rules that you have provided it. And I think people like Cursor get that. They have rules that you can provide. Claude has rules you can provide. A lot of the tools that are really good out there are ones that can work well out of the box, but also be customized to how you work every day.
I fully agree. And as someone who tends to be a power user of most of the tools I use, I think it's invaluable. Do you think there's a line, whether it's in like the capability of the tool or even just the interface, where giving users this type of customizability could actually shoot themselves in the foot because the prompt would be either poor styling or it just kind of steers the model in the wrong way? Is there too much customizability that could actually negatively impact these tools?
I think it's definitely possible, but I'm still all for giving it to folks. I just think you have to have smart defaults though, because most people we know don't actually change a lot of the settings or customize and anything like that. But I think it's giving them the potential to do so, but they don't have to. The biggest worry to me about giving a lot of options and a lot of customization is that sometimes the people developing the tools become lazy then on what the defaults are, because they say, oh, someone's going to just change it to whatever they want. You should still have a very clear golden path kind of workflow that works well out of the box where people can try it out without having to do any customization.
Is there an approach where you can allow this type of highly customized user data to be able to fed back in to contribute to the eval system? So I'm thinking like if we test for golden path, everything looks good, user decides to change things and just catastrophically impacts performance. Is there a way we could catch that ahead of time?
I don't know if we can catch it ahead of time, but I do think that if you log and test the kind of things that you're seeing real users doing, you should be able to find cases where these are failing. So that's a lot of like, okay, if they change the prompt this way, it doesn't pass evals anymore. And maybe we should surface to them in some way. Or maybe we should provide some guidance, some guardrails that start to kind of keep them on track. Or maybe we're okay with that because we make it very clear to them, if you change this, it's not going to pass what we think is working, but as long as you like it, then that's fine. I think there's levels that you can do to kind of close that loop. I don't think it's one of those things where you just kind of ignore it completely. I definitely think depending, especially if you're building a SaaS tool, you can log this information and come back and kind of like get that data flywheel going anyway.
If I do discover this bad input that leads to this thing and I start etching my eval set, would you recommend just going with the production data, or should I kind of multiply it by doing synthetic copies of it to add a bit more variety to my eval suite?
It depends a lot on your particular use case and how large of a data set that you have. So if you're seeing examples that you don't have in your existing eval data set, synthetic data is very useful for that. So this is very common if you have like what is it? Like one positive example for like 99 negative examples, right? Which is pretty common for people who do things like fraud detection. And they don't just sit there and train only on this unbalanced data set. They either do like resampling and duplicate effort, or they use synthetic data, or they do any number of things to kind of rebalance their data. And I think if you're in those kind of cases where it's very, very unbalanced, you should find options there. But if your distribution of your data set looks a lot like your distribution of your users and it's not terribly unbalanced, like I think it's okay just to stick with your production data.
Okay. And how would you manage having, say you're trying to build a big data set, partially for evals, but also partially for training a model? Would you kind of keep it the same? Do you separate them because they have different purposes? Or how do you do your data set management?
That's a good question. I think, again, it kind of depends on how much of the training are you doing. Many people working on agents today are like at most doing fine tuning. They're not doing like heavy training of a model. If you are doing like complete training of a model, you probably do want a different data set that is maybe representative, more, you're making sure it is well distributed and like fits the real use cases very well. But I think if you're just doing evals, it's okay to have many eval data sets that you've created. So you might say like, hey, here's an eval data set that just represents our power users. I'm not going to train just on that, but I will do eval on that as kind of a tranche of data that I want to look at. I might have another eval data set that's purely synthetic data, or like purely my golden path data set. Or I might have another eval data set that is like just a sampling across the board. I think it's very reasonable to have a number of data sets that you're kind of experimenting and testing with. But when it comes to training, that's different because you do need to make a choice on like, how do you put this all together to train or fine tune a model, in which case, yeah, you probably want to make sure that it's appropriately sampled and kind of distribution looks good. And you might want to keep that as a separate thing. There's also some worry about overfitting. You probably do want some sort of blind test set, especially if you're training a model where you're not just going to train on everything that you saw. You want to keep a chunk of data separate. That is kind of best practice here.
Okay, and one thing, I actually haven't heard it before, but it makes perfect sense, is having those multiple data sets for evals along different lines. Do you manage it with Git? Is there a certain program you'd recommend? Or do you just keep JSON-L files? Like, how would you have these different data sets in your code bases?
Right now, we define all that in code ourselves. So it's just like in Git, like you're saying, it's like, hey, here's the data set that matches to this particular these set of samples. And then we keep all the actual data itself in just data storage, right? It's just like S3-ish kind of thing. I think different people do it a little differently. If you're doing like large scale training, you might be using something like weights and biases. But if you're just doing eval with a kind of homegrown eval data set, completely reasonable just to kind of write it this way yourself, just keep track of it in a simple Git, in a simple like file.
What is the next big unsolved problem for agent building? If someone wants to come up and spin their own agent, where do you see gaps currently that could help accelerate people's development of these agents?
For me, it's very much this, how do you improve an agent once you built it? I think that it's kind of back to the eval discussion. I know I talk about evals a lot, but I think that this is kind of like, the reason I think about it a lot is it is somewhat unsolved, and how do you automatically do that? I want a self-improving system, a self-improving agent system. Every time someone uses my product or my agent and it works well, I want that to feed back into a data set. Every time it doesn't work well, I want that to feed it back into a data set. And then I want to see that automatically improve my system over time. That is not solved yet. I'm actively working on some parts of that. I know other people are working on different parts of this. I think it's a very hard problem, but I think it's the thing that's going to help, a million companies go out there and build agents. I want the 1 and 2 person companies that can build these kind of systems. And you can't do that if you require like a full-time applied scientist who's sitting there just sifting through data all the time. We should be building the tools and applications that make it easier for 1 or 2 people to just build these applications and kind of hit go and see them improve every day.
I would love a tool like that. Do you foresee that being something that's an offering from either a big research lab company or even an open source project?
Yes, I expect that parts of this will probably come in from open source. I think open source is always a good place to look to see like which parts of these tools. I don't expect to see a full end-to-end system that does that in open source because it is a very complex and relatively expensive thing to do. So I think you're going to see parts of this coming from the big labs, and then I think there'll be people like us who build more at the application level, who will probably build more of an end-to-end system that pulls together these different things. So hooks into the APIs for fine-tuning for OpenAI and Anthropic or Fireworks or someone like that, and then ideally can combine things that we know about your observability data and how customers are using your product with the annotated data that you might have got from a different system. I think there's kind of this like orchestration and interaction layer that's missing right now.
Do you see any projects that excite you or any possibility for like the ambient agent future, where instead of me having to go to a chat box, tell it what I want, it can pick up on cues or signals from my other workflows and then just start automatically running a process?
Absolutely. Some of our agents do this already. So the AI SRE, as you'd imagine, you don't want to have to go and tell it when something's wrong. So right now we are triggering it off of an alert going off. So if you're like normally would get page, instead of paging you, maybe your AI SRE should be kicked off first. And that's just a natural workflow that's occurring that you want it to run in the background before you even get to your computer. And then when you get there, you can start to interact with it. I expect more and more in those kind of proactive or asynchronous agents to exist out there. Email comes in. I've heard of a few companies working on this in early stage where they're just triggering workflows and agents to work off of just emails coming through, or your text coming through, or phone call coming through, or anything like that. These are all things that I think we can easily place agents.
And for those are very clear avenues of like data comes in, initiate a process. What are your thoughts on the more devices we're starting to see that do passive audio collection, where you kind of have a necklace, you're walking around, it just picks up things? Do you view that as something that's going to be a valuable import towards agents, or do you think it's more of a privacy concern, which will probably get squashed because public opinion on having always on recording devices isn't exactly there?
I think it's an interesting space. I'm still not sold that they're going to be a common occurrence yet. But I do think that we've seen a change in how people expect these products to live. Like products like the AI Pendants or Rewind's product or anyone like that, or what was the other one? Friend.ai or friend.com. I think people are open to them more than they used to be. We're not in the Glasshole days anymore. If you recall, you wear Google Glass and all of a sudden
Yeah.
you're banned from everywhere. I don't think we're in that, and I am seeing more and more people wear these kind of pendants and try them out. I think a lot of it just comes down to, do you get enough value out of it? People will be okay giving up some aspect of privacy as long as, one, you are trying to be, you kind of earn their trust by showing that you are keeping this data private as well, and two, you're getting value out of it. If you're not getting value out of it, that's very different. No one wants to just go around, record their day, and then not actually get anything out of it. But I like the idea of having a infinite memory, within reason. I do think it's a little awkward if you don't have one and someone else you're talking to has one. Then you might kind of be careful about what you're saying to them, and maybe that becomes kind of unnatural itself.
Yeah, I'm actually noticing it too with online video calls. People are running granola in the background, so they transcribe the whole thing without really getting consent. It's the way things are evolving.
Yep.
One area that's been a big focus of mine is privacy and security. And with AI, privacy is pretty much the polar opposite from getting all the data to make these systems run adequately. Do you see local, private, offline models being able to compete with these bigger models, whether if it's like an orchestrated fleet of highly specialized ones, or do you think the gap between like the super clusters, data centers, and what people can run locally is going to be too vast that there'll never really be an alternative besides these large centralized models?
Well, this is where I think the task you're doing matters a lot. I don't think there's nowhere anytime soon that we're going to have local models that are better than the big models at everything. But if you're just doing speech recognition, transcription, yeah, local is fine. Like locals, actually, we brought word error rates down on these smaller models so much nowadays that you can easily run a speech recognition model that sits on your computer, your phone, whatever, and is just as good, and your audio doesn't need to go to the cloud. Same for very simple tasks. I think that there's a lot of, like, if I'm going to go and do classification, tagging my photos or classifying the text notes that I'm running, you can probably have a small LLM. I guess that's kind of counterintuitive. They're calling them SLIMs now. It's not, SLM, small language model, not a small large language model. That's sitting on your machine, that knows you, is customized for you, is maybe a distilled version of of a much larger, smarter model. That is able to work maybe even in conjunction with a model in the cloud. I really like the hybrid systems. I think that could help a lot with privacy, where you do some work on local, and maybe some of the local work anonymizes some of the input that you have. And then you send more complex kind of problems up to the larger model in the cloud. That's used by a lot of people nowadays too.
Yeah, I saw a paper. I actually forget who did it, but recently where were able to get full encryption, so you can run things locally. When it needs help from the bigger model, it sends it out. I'm also very optimistic about that. You briefly mentioned the voice recognition running locally. I use Super Whisper all the time. I'd say 90% of my prompts are spoken rather than typed. And because I kind of use Open Interpreter for some tasks, I can actually control a fair bit of my computer with my voice. Do you use speech to text at all?
A little bit, less than I used to. I used to use a lot more when I would drive, but I take the subway now, and you don't want to be that annoying guy in the subway.
Yeah.
And then all of us are in open offices nowadays too. So I think that's the two downsides. Like, I love speech to text. As I said, I worked on Alexa, I worked on Cortana, I worked on the Connect for Xbox a long time ago too. Like, I love speech modalities. I think that really is the direction we're going over time. But there is an aspect of this that's, well, I don't want to be annoying in a public space, so I do a lot of typing.
Yeah, I've seen some people come out with little like whisper models, not whisper the model,
Yes.
but you can just whisper to it. Maybe. I think if you're in a situation where you feel socially obligated to whisper, you probably should be using voice to text anyways.
Precisely.
But we'll see how society evolves. I work from home, use it all the time. It's been great.
Yeah, at home I do use it. As long as I'm not trying to like wake up my kid, I'll be like, if I'm like yelling at the computer, I don't want to be waking him up next door.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, got to be responsible. Do you have any other general advice or insights on evals, so when people do build their agents, they're able to kind of have a little checklist or just some best practices in the back of mind so they can make sure that they cover the foundation to get a good performance?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a few things. One is basically, as I said, make sure you actually know how to evaluate your particular custom task. Two is have a really good process for error analysis, basically, or like digging through your data. This is kind of the second part of, like, just look at your data. You shouldn't be just logging this information and automating everything. You should actually feel pretty comfortable going and looking at single instances of data, going and looking at clusters of data, and just digging in, and have a good tool for doing that. That might be something you build custom yourself. That might be something that exists out there that you're just, know how to query well. And then 3 is just know how to close that data loop. Okay, you get this information. What am I going to do with it? Does that know how to experiment, know how to run those experiments? If you have that kind of loop going, everything else will be extra.
Perfect. All right. Last question for me today. What does techno-optimism mean to you?
For me, it's a lot of being optimistic about improvements we can bring with the current technology that's out there, and where things are going. I think that there is a aspect of folks sometimes who don't want things to change, and that's the kind of pessimistic view to me. I think we can do a lot more every day. We can do a lot more for people. We can do a lot more for the environment. We can do a lot more for our children, a lot more for where things are going in the country over the next 50 plus years, if we lean into using technology to solve a lot of our problems. That is, doing more with AI, that is doing more with just kind of where we're going to, improving things like nuclear power, improving things like battery storage for our solar systems, and leaning into that rather than being worried about it.
Yep. Diamond, this has been super informative. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with all of us. Before I let you go, is there anything what the audience to know? Where can they keep up with you?
Find me on Twitter. I'm Diamond Bishop on Twitter, or X, I guess is what we're supposed to call it now. I'm looking for people who are building agents, and especially early in that development cycle, just looking to get more feedback. To me, it's very important to kind of talk to people who are early in the stage to see what problems they're hitting, how we can help you do eval, how we can help you improve these things automatically. So if you are someone doing that, reach out to me. Happy to chat.
Perfect. We'll link everything down below. And Diamond, thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. See ya.